if we mess up again, we didn't the first time, so that's also a good sign. So welcome to the rebuild. I am one of your hosts, Tahra Hoops, and I am joined with Gary Winslett. And today we have a great guest joining us. We're here to talk about our new report, the Cost of Living Blueprint. And we are joined with no one better to dig into this than Gabe Horwitz of Third Way. He is the senior VP for the economic program over at Third Way, where he's leading their work on housing, energy, workforce, and the broader affordability agenda. His team has put out some important research recently, a plan to build 12 million homes, major polling on energy costs. We even cite in the blueprint, and some brand new research on who Democratic primary voters even are and what they want heading into 2028. So thank you both for being here with me.
Happy to be here.
The first thing we'll jump into, Gary, I will pass this on to you. What would you say is your one sentence diagnosis of the cost of living crisis that is going to actually persuade folks? And how much do you think that is tying into our cost of living blueprint?
I mean, I think the one sentence would be, we just don't have enough. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough healthcare providers. We don't have enough daycare slots. We don't have enough energy. We just don't have enough of any of it. And so we need to just build more of it. And I hope this will be persuasive to voters, because I think people recognize that sort of as a lived experience, right? Like if you just can't find a house that's at your price range, like in this very visceral way that there's not enough. If like I remember when we have a 7-year-old, but back in the day we needed daycare, and I think we applied to like 10 or 11 different daycares before we found a slot. If that's something you run into, you just see it very viscerally that like there's not enough. So that would be my one sentence: is we don't have enough, we need more.
That is so crazy to me that getting into daycare is as hard as getting into college these days for parents. Like I just can't imagine the anxiety that you guys are going through with that. But if voters are pretty furious over these high costs, like what does it take to actually get voters to trust and understand that Democrats can deliver for them? There's this one haunting stat that came out of one of the arguments recent polling, where around the 65% who are upset with the cost of living, only 55% of them are going to be siding with Democrats. So how can we build that trust that we have right now with them?
I mean, I think the first thing you got to do is recognize that voters aren't crazy, right? If voters are looking at blue states and blue cities, and that's where housing is really expensive because they don't build enough housing, the voters are not nuts to say like, hey, that doesn't look like affordable to me. And so part of what Democrats have to do is just recognize that like we have to do better and be better on this, whether that's housing or whether that's, just like reforming occupational licensing, right? Like there are all kinds of ways in which this like we don't have enough thing is not like a magic misfortune that dropped from the sky, like you got hit by a bad thunderstorm or something. Like we've self-sabotaged in important ways. And so I think voters need to see in very clear ways that that the Democrats understand that we need to be better, and here's how we're going to be better.
Gabe, I wanted to ask what you yourself and Third Way are thinking about how, when you understand where Democrats went wrong exactly, losing this trust with voters. It seems like a lot of the times we are resulting on just demand subsidies alone, and we aren't combining that with any supply constraints or conditions.
Yeah, I mean, Gary's right. Gary said we're not building enough. And if you're only focused on the demand side, you're ignoring half, maybe more of the problem. And I think about your blueprint, it highlights massive supply issues across all these different areas that middle class families care a lot about. And when we ask families what it means to live a middle class life, they always talk about 5 things. They talk about childcare, education, housing, healthcare, and retirement, always. And all of those are too expensive. There's a supply component to all of them. And if you're just focusing on demand, it ignores it. There's a political problem too, though, with demand, which is we did polling last year and we asked people what they thought about spending. And 2/3 of voters have concerns with Democratic spending. They think we spend too much or spend on the wrong things or don't care about waste. And so if your answer is only spending, you're not doing anything to turn around your brand. So we need to start flexing that supply muscle a lot more.
And a lot of that obviously is concentrated in housing, as you mentioned. I wanted to dig in a bit on the big housing proposal you guys released last year on 12 million new homes. Can you talk about some of the mechanisms that you guys highlight on how we can achieve that?
Yeah, and I will stipulate, we weren't anticipating this was going to pass tomorrow or
Oh,
next
yes.
month. This is one of these, we're doing a big body of work to really target 2028 candidates. There's going to be a
Mhm.
million people on stage. And the question is, what is their vision going to be for this country? And what is it going to be when it comes to the economy, for housing, for affordability, for all of that? And we need people to think big, and we need them to think simply. And so we thought, let's set a big goal, 12 million homes, that's double the current rate of construction. And let's have big policies that feed up to that, that voters can understand. Let's take away all tariffs. Let's start building on federal lands where you're seeing a huge shortage of houses. Let's spur a huge modular construction renaissance. There's things that are simple and yet big and would fundamentally change it. And we would love to see presidential candidates, candidates of all stripes, really talking about those issues a lot more.
Gabe, can I ask you about the federal land question? Because
Yeah.
this is something that I find like a really interesting thing to think through. Because like I could imagine some federal land, like I don't know, a 200-acre tract like outside of Salt Lake City, that just like makes a ton of sense to build on. But then I've
Yeah.
also seen maps of like where federal land is, and like I just don't know how much housing demand there is in like Alaska.
Yeah.
The middle of
We're just in the
Nevada,
middle of nowhere.
yeah, middle of nowhere. And also when like the Trump administration started proposing something like this last year, I was very skeptical because I don't trust them to do this in a way that's like thoughtful at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I would just be curious to hear more about your thoughts on this like building on federal land issue.
Yeah, so there's a couple components there. So I think number one, do we trust the current administration to do this well? I do not. Do I think there's a possibility, though, for a more thoughtful administration to do something like this? I do.
Mhm.
We're not talking about building in the middle of Glacier National Park. We're not talking about building in the middle of very delicate wetlands. But there are numbers, and of course, I don't have them here in front of me. But if you look at all the federal lands out there, there's a percentage that are close to metropolitan areas that need homes. And that's where I would target. And even if it's 5% or 7% of all the federal lands, you're still talking about a huge potential to get more building done. I also think about unused military bases. We have a lot of these across the country, some of which are being repurposed, some of which are not. If you've got an unused military base, I'm sure there's going to be environmental cleanup. I'm sure there's other issues. Why not build there, though? It's probably closer to a metropolitan center.
So, do you know about Fort Devens in Massachusetts?
No, where is it?
Oh, so Fort Devens it immediately pops to mind as soon as you say this. It's this like unused military base, like not far outside of Boston, and like
There you go.
the thing that's there right now is like a frisbee golf course, which is like fun. I've played it a number of times. I enjoy it, but like that would be much better for like housing than just like people playing like frisbee golf and
All the frisbee golfers now are going to start boycotting your Substack because
sure.
of war on them. But I agree.
Yeah.
Why? Or you know what? Keep some of the frisbee golf, but let's have some mixed use housing there too.
Sure.
Yeah.
100%.
And you just better use that for families.
Uh-huh.
I was just going to highlight that people forget how good mixed use housing adds to a community. Like they're always talking about how like more housing is just going to destroy like the neighborhood character. And then you go over to Europe and you're walking around, you're like, everything feels so lively and amazing. And it's because people are enjoying coffee on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
They're walking into bookstores that also like people can live above.
Right.
In New York, just about every single store in Manhattan has housing attached to it, which I remember back in like my college days, there was nothing greater than getting to leave my dorm or apartment at that time and having a Taco Bell down below me. It was incredible. It felt like heaven. So I want to switch gears and get into the energy side of this. It's one of the 4 core pillars that we talk about in the blueprint. As you mentioned, those are going to be housing, energy, raising kids, and healthcare. For energy, there's a lot of overlap that we have with Third Way. And I want to talk about the recent survey you guys had. Obviously, there is an overwhelming majority that utility costs have gone up, energy costs have gone up. With what is happening right now in current events, people are witnessing an ongoing supply shock that we haven't seen in decades. But there is a problem. Like, not many people believe that clean energy costs can actually bring down costs. And there's a lot of negative messaging around clean energy. So it seems like we're kind of losing the messaging war. And that could be from the Democrats of like 2010s and the activists then focusing more on climate change, resilience, and ideology conversations, which of course climate change is important. But now when it comes to the cost side, they don't really trust us anymore. So how can we fix that?
Yeah, there's this huge disconnect between Democratic rhetoric on these issues and voter
Mhm.
concerns. And when you listen to advocates, well-meaning, thoughtful folks, they're talking about emissions, they're talking about sea level rise, and meanwhile, voters are thinking about bills and
Mhm.
how they afford things. And so we need to stop leading with climate and start leading with costs. And I would love to see us obsessing about building more clean energy,
Mhm.
because when you build more, it means lower prices, it means more reliability, it means energy independence. Building more gets cheaper power. And by the way, you're also going to do wonderful things for the environment as well. You just don't want to lead with it. You want to meet voters
Mhm.
really where they are.
Yeah, I tend to call this the end of the world, end of the month problem,
It's
where
great.
like the environmentalists are always talking about like the end of the world, but like your average voter is thinking about the end of the month.
Yeah.
And like we've just
Yeah.
got to close that gap.
And we kind of like don't understand, like, as we were talking about this, we could still reach the climate goals that we have.
Mhm.
It's just shifting the messaging around it. And even with this current administration, obviously clean energy projects are getting bogged down left and right. It is a major issue right now. But prior to this job, I was working in carbon removal and green energy tech. And I had to work closely with the Biden admin and the great team members they had there. They were doing everything they can. But the amount of questions and paperwork and community engagement that had to go on when it came on to any expansions here in California, it just felt like something that was never ending. And a lot of the times I remember people in the industry were always saying, like, you kind of have to forget about the government being a partnership there and look to private partners instead, which I don't think should be the case. I think the government should have their hands on the next leading generation for green innovation. So another thing I wanted to also bring up, as we mentioned, of the four pillars that we have, and switch gears a little bit, is now onto healthcare. The blueprint argues that obviously it is going to be on the table to reverse the disastrous cuts that this administration has done to the healthcare that we've had. They have also not expanded any of the ACA credits as well. And that is going to be costly and also like life threatening to millions of Americans. But we also touch on more of a problem we haven't touched before, which is just like the supply of doctors that we have. There is a projected shortage of around 85,000 physicians by 2035. That is an insane number. And since 2010, we've already had over 100 rural hospitals closed. So how should Democrats be reframing how we discuss healthcare as we look to a new administration in 2026 as well?
Um, yeah, I look, the biggest issues in healthcare is such an expansive space. When I think about
Mhm.
that, though, it's two things. It's costs and it's complexity. It
Mhm.
costs way too much, and it's a massive pain in the ass to navigate. And I think Democrats over the years have gotten a lot better on their messaging. When you look back to the beginning part of the ACA debate, Democrats were framing everything as universal coverage. We're going to cover
Mhm.
everybody. The problem with that is, and it's a noble goal, but the majority of people have coverage. So they don't think you're talking about them, and you completely miss voters. So
Mhm.
they pivoted and got a lot better on the other benefits of the ACA. And since then, we've gotten a lot better as a party talking about costs. We saw this last year with the shutdown.
Mhm.
Democrats, who are not um, very good at focusing on one thing, we managed, we did great. We focused on one thing, and it was healthcare costs.
Mhm.
And what I love about your work is there is a supply component here too. More doctors, more nurses, more clinics, more rural access, all of that. Um, what I also don't want to miss though is getting rid of some of the complexity. And
Mhm.
we don't want more electronic health records. We all have plenty of those. We don't want more bureaucracy. We've got plenty of that. So in my mind, it's really a cost and complexity thing with healthcare.
I really like the complexity point because that's something that, again, like regular people just experience. Like you
Right.
go interact with the healthcare system and it's bewildering. Even if you like think of yourself as like a savvy person and you can like think things through in other areas of life, you go try to like get healthcare and you're just like, wait, I have to talk to who first? What? Why? Like, where do I go? Like, what is this thing you're talking about? I need a number on the back of my card. Like, it's just it's a way of just like experiencing the system that's like deeply frustrating. And so I actually think that that's like a really important point to highlight.
I like how you mentioned the shutdown last year and how Democrats were able to capitalize on that to really work on their messaging, because I find that Republicans often hide behind the complexity issues that happens in healthcare. When it came to Medicaid, many people looked at that and are like, well, I'm not on Medicaid, so it doesn't matter. But a lot of people don't understand that each state can name their Medicaid program differently. So people were being impacted and had no clue they were being impacted. So I saw many from senators, representatives, even down to local councils putting out a lot of messaging and posts like saying like, if your insurance has any of these names, you will also be included in these cuts. And that was something that I haven't seen it before, because people don't understand, like, you have to really get down to the basics and not talk like along when you're communicating with voters. It sounds like something we should just like agree on, but yet has not been done until recent times. So I was really glad to see Democrats really shift gears there and reach more voters. And we saw in the polling that it really did work for us. So I hope there was some lessons there on how we can communicate on this across the board.
Yeah,
One
you're right. Medicaid and also the ACA, people don't know that they're on the ACA exchange because you're in Kentucky or you're in Massachusetts and they're
Exactly.
all called something different. So it's a great point you made.
And then one more thing on healthcare, Gary, I will turn this over to you. So in the blueprint, we do some proven game changers, which are bills that already have like legislation behind it, a lot of movement, but we also have some bold ideas. Sometimes they're small, or sometimes they're like pretty big ones that you're like, wait, we're not already doing that. So Gary, I want to ask if there were any of the bold ideas in here that you wanted to highlight.
I mean, there's a couple that are like really important. One is just removing the cap on residency, resident physician positions, right? Like we put
Mhm.
that cap on in the late 90s because there was this weird concern that we were going to have too many, but that proved out to be like wrong very quickly. Even the American Medical Association doesn't support keeping this cap anymore. It just doesn't make sense to have this like artificial constraint on the number of doctors that we train because well and it makes no sense in a bunch of different ways. The first one is just that like we've got people who have the smarts and drive and desire to be doctors, but then we're
Mhm.
saying that there's no residency for you, so you just get shunted out of the system, which like doesn't make any sense. But then also, and it is a subtle but important problem, it will doctors often like start to put down roots while they're in residency,
Mhm.
and so they develop families, they develop friends, they develop professional networks, and so they're less likely on the margin to want to move. And so by freezing where residencies were basically in the late 90s, we've made our doctor shortage most acute in places that are growing. And so like there's like a double problem there. And so like that would be just like the first thing that I would highlight is like we don't have enough doctors and like
Mhm.
did that to ourselves. Like this is one of the things that I think sometimes sounds a little negative when I say it that way, but to me is actually hopeful because if the source of the problem is that you self-sabotaged,
Mhm.
it actually gives you some agency, right? That means you can stop self-sabotaging. And so that would be just one that I would highlight.
I find that to be a really funny framing, because I remember like this time last year when we were at like peak like abundance discourse, and everyone was just like, you guys just all hate Democrats and you're secret Republicans because you're criticizing them so much. It's like, no, I love Democrats so much that I want us to win. And this is why we have to look deep within ourselves, do some introspection, and think like, how can we fix this? How
Mhm.
can we get good again? Because we can't be looking at the greatest cities that we had. They're always going to be typically blue cities. And then people feel like they need to move away from them because they simply can't afford them for a myriad of reasons. So we just need to look within the source of all these problems and work from there. So one more thing on the healthcare side, Gabe, I wanted to ask if there's something over a third way that you guys find to be maybe like a small fix, but that one is people aren't really talking about. Obviously, when we talk about healthcare, we've mentioned how complex it is, but anything that comes to mind from there?
Oh my, there's so much. Yeah, I'll give you one. So I think, you talked about this. Democrats have been really focused on the ACA and Medicaid, and I
Mhm.
think those are great. But we're not talking nearly enough about employer-sponsored healthcare and the
Mm.
massive people who have employer-sponsored care and who are still dealing with costs and complexity. So one thing that we've been talking about for years is there's a cost cap in the ACA when it comes to premiums and deductibles. Why don't we
Mhm.
carry that over to employer-sponsored insurance? It would be a massive cost savings for families, and it would help really, really bring down, Gary talked about your end of the month expenses. That would really help there. Another one, and this is just a personal thing. Every time I go to the doctor, I get a new EHR, electronic health record. Can we just
Mhm.
have one, please? I just want one. I just want one for all my doctors. I want one for my kid. I want my wife to have one. I don't need 18. And I think really simplifying that goes to just the pain that and the frustration that so many families are dealing with. So that's one on costs and one on complexity.
I think that's great. And I don't think I've seen that mentioned in the conversations happening right now. So I really do appreciate hearing that. And on the topic of families, one of the core pillars that we have in here is raising families, period. For recent decades, it's been Republicans being painted as the pro family party. But I'm of the mindset that Democrats should rightfully reclaim that. I
Yeah.
think it's clear that their policies are only harming families. They're either making them less safe or harder to afford goods. Like the amount of tariffs that we saw on baby goods, the impact was harsh and severe. And this is actually a section where it's not only just going to be on supply, there are some demand type subsidies, such as the child tax credit. The expanded child tax credit was incredible. It cut child poverty nearly in half. I always talk about the child tax credit because it is just such a great policy. And yet, we kind of did let it expire. And I would love to discuss like why that happened. It was such a contentious battle when it was occurring. But for either of you to jump in to give some more hindsight there and other policies that we should be looking at to make it more affordable to have a family.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, you want to go first? You want me to?
Sure. I mean, I would just say on the CTC, one of the things that I loved most about it, and I still, even in its smaller form, it's still there, is that it's really flexible to different kinds of family preferences, right? Like some families want both people going out into the workforce and they use daycare full time. Some families, they want one person working part time. Some families want a stay at home parent. Some parents want to rely on a family member like a grandparent or something. And just like doing the CTC, which is just a tax credit, is just like really flexible to the
Mhm.
way that people want to go about their lives. This is one of the things that I would love to see Democrats lean more into. Is like when we provide good public infrastructure, we're not telling you how to live your life. We're helping you live whatever life you want to live. And I really do like over in the corner. I'll even turn my camera. You can see this like thing I got from the DNC in 2024. It's just about freedom. Like I would love to
Mhm.
see Democrats reclaim this idea of freedom and that we are actually the ones that are helping you have the freedom to like live your life. Whether that's helping you raise children through the CDC or mass transit, whatever it is you
Mhm.
want to do, we trust you and we like you and we want to like help you like do your best.
I love that framing. I don't know if this is going to be an unpopular take. I think we messed up the CTC messaging from the beginning. And
Hmm.
I love the policy. I think it's phenomenal. And I am proud of the fact that it reduced childhood poverty.
Mhm.
Yes. And I think that was the wrong message. And because the reason is if you are saying it's an anti poverty thing, if
Mhm.
you are either not poor or maybe you are poor by some federal guideline, but you don't think of yourself as poor, you don't think
Mhm.
that policy's for you. And worse, you think Democrats are helping somebody else, not you. And so I think we've messed up the framing of it from the beginning. If we had said, I'm making this up, this is a working parent tax cut to help lower the cost of raising kids, it
Mhm.
would have much more appeal across income strata, across partisan levels. I think we would have built in more buy-in from the beginning. Again, I love it. I just want more
Mhm.
people to love it. And I think calling it something different would increase that appeal.
Yeah, I think what was always most helpful to the conversation around the CTC is to talk about the use cases that came from it. The New York Times around that in 2021 and 2022, it was a long time ago when I read it, but I remember reading this and it talked about the ways that families were using this to help benefit their families. And a lot of them were starting like side businesses during this
Yeah.
time. This is when Etsy was booming and parents felt like they now had enough money to one, invest in their kid and a little bit left over where they can contribute it back into the workforce. And it's also important to understand like how it helps allow a child to develop in life. When kids are better fed, when they have a stable home, they tend to have stable careers, go to college, and then again contribute into the economy, contribute in taxes and so forth. So to me, I'm always of the mindset that we kind of overinvest into the boomer economy and we have failed to help prop up the kids of tomorrow. So that is something I will always like go so hard on. And I get so upset whenever I go back to the stats on this. But I do appreciate your perspective there because I think if we were going to have this conversation now, a lot of people would like to hear about how it is going to help the working class work harder. Obviously, after we lost the election, Bernie Sanders was very quick to say, like, Democrats lost because like we abandoned the working class. I kind of agreed with sort of his framing, but I did push back on it quite a bit just because if you look back on the history, like Republicans were just never there for the working class. But it's clear we had a cost of living election. And I think there was a lot of conversation surrounding on like post material needs instead of material needs. And Gary, I see you're wanting to talk.
Yeah, I mean, so Democrats made some mistakes on this, and I just think it's really important to own up to those mistakes. Like one of those was around student loan forgiveness.
Mhm.
Like that is not a policy that reads to working class people as like helping
I
them.
liked it.
And I always just want to like have a time machine and go back and convince the Biden administration, if you're going to do debt forgiveness, please start with medical debt. Please don't
Yeah.
start with student loan debt. Like the
Mhm.
politics of that would just played so much differently. People don't choose to get heart attacks, right? And it was a huge mistake, and I've not heard enough like reckoning within the party of like why that was such a mistake. And so I think part of it is just coming to terms with the fact that like again this did not fall from the sky. Like we
Mhm.
made some mistakes and we've learned from them.
I think it's such a good point because if you think about 2/3 of workers don't have a college degree. And if you are talking to the 1/3, okay, you can, whether you like that policy or not, that's only speaking to 1/3. You've totally
Mhm.
missed the other 2/3. But Gary's right, 100 million people have medical debt in this country. And it'd be a much more salient place to start if you're trying to reach voters.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes every time we go back to the retrospective conversations, the first thing that comes to my head is like, if only the DNC released their autopsy report. But I think that is why it's up to people exactly just like us to go back, look at the polling at that time, see what truly mattered to them, and then try to mark that up to see where they are now. And it goes back to the persuasion gap that we mentioned at the beginning of this, like people still care about the cost of living, and Trump has just not delivered on any of it, which he is aware of. And you have like all these people coming out like Besant and who just go out there every single day on the TV screens like, you know what, it could be worse, but we just have Biden to blame. Like it's just not working for these voters anymore. But it's still not enough for us to be in the opposition anymore. We have to now provide solutions in order for them to fully trust us and close that gap. So I know we are coming close on time here, but I did want to point to either of you if you guys have any final thoughts as we keep going into this affordability conversation for the midterms and how Democrats could make sure we don't make the wrong mistakes here.
Gabe, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I just want us to not forget, and I say this to left of center policymakers and candidates.
Mhm.
Voters are frustrated with the current system. We know this. It's can't blame them with all the chaos that's happening. Um, I think abundance has a lot of potential here. I really
Mhm.
do. I fundamentally believe in it, but we can't think of this issue as state capacity, scarcity mindset, even abundance. That's wonk talk. I love all of that stuff, but it's not going to appeal to voters. And I think if we are going to succeed in really reaching more people, we have to talk about how we are reforming government, we are making it work better for you, we are not wasting your money, and we are fundamentally lowering your costs, increasing your wealth, and then getting out of the way. And I think we can do that. Your blueprint is a great example of that. It's just so common sense and well written and amazing. But I know we're running time for me to give accolades. But and we just need more of that. So that's how I would close. But Gary, to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to Gabe's point to not talk in theory, but just talk in practice. Like this is why, when we first started this was 2024, and we called it the Democratic Cost of Living Agenda, because cost of living is how regular people talk. They don't talk in abundance. So just like, don't start with like your theory. Like start with like housing is too expensive, and here's how we're going to make it more affordable. Healthcare is too expensive and too complicated. Here's what we're going to do to make sure that you're not like always like sitting up worried at night. How are you going to afford your premiums? Childcare is really expensive. Here's what we're going to do to like, make sure that we have universal free school meals, right? Like there's just like, to me, it's always just like start from like the practice. And then later, if you talk about some theory, that's fine. But like, don't center the theory, like center the practice and the pragmatism.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I mentioned before, when it was peak discourse for the ongoing abundance debates, it's like I was not expecting people to go out there and have signs saying like, we need more permitting reform. Like that is just not going to speak to the average person. If I called my mother now and was like, did you hear about this candidate? They're really good at permitting reform. She'd be like, I have no clue what you're talking about to me. You're speaking a different language, which is perfectly fine. The average person is not a wonk, but they are going to care about the results of your policies. And that is why you have to make sure you're campaigning on what you would like your results to be. And on the policy side, make sure you are designing the policies that can actually reach those goals. Because the amount of time since I have started my career in the policy world, how many times I say, while this policy was well-intentioned, it does not do what it would like to do. So we have to work on the designing and the implementing, and we need our policymakers and those running to really work on the messaging and the results side. So I think I will end it there. Thank you both for being here. I really do appreciate this. We're very new to the Substack Live space, but it's always fun to try out these things out, and we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Good to see you guys.
You as well,
Good to see you.